Nice. Yeah, so what'd you get up to today?
I'm in the co-working space of RESTAR, but RESTAR uses for the third time actually since I started. Yeah, I want to come every week to this co-working space, which is pretty nice. In my previous job, we didn't have an office, so I got to see people every like 3 months maybe. Most people were in Japan, but yeah, I kind of missed being in an office. And before that, in my previous job, yeah, that was a pandemic, and I used to see people like every day, like 40 people, fun people. So I kind of missed that. So that's one of the reasons I joined RESTAR as well, like the bit more team spirit and seeing people again.
Yeah, it's nice that it's like partial remote and not full remote.
Yeah, that is a good
RESTAR.
one. Yeah, for me especially because I have a kid now. So
yeah,
he's 1 year old. He's pretty cute, but also it's a lot of work. It's very tiring. But and he goes to daycare, and I have to. I drop him off occasionally at like 9 a.m. and we have to pick him up at 5 p.m. so that he doesn't spend like 10 hours at daycare. Sure. So working from home is like very, very convenient. That was a big reason as well why I joined RESTAR as well. Is like they have a remote work policy.
Yeah. I mean, is it like advantageous or a good environment for parents to join RESTAR in terms of the work environment?
I mean, so far so good. I want to say there are like other parents in the company as well. Yeah. And just people are like the company in general is aware that people have some people have kids, and that may mean that you have to be a bit flexible with occasionally your kid is sick or you have to pick them up from somewhere, like bring them to the doctor. So yeah, like I discussed this a bit before joining RESTAR, and that was absolutely not a problem.
What was the process for you to join RESTAR?
I was referred to RESTAR by a friend who works here at RESTAR, and there was if I remember correctly, there was first a technical test, but was not too bad. It was mostly theoretical. I didn't actually have to. Some tests are like take-home assignments. Like you have to actually code a little project. I've had to do that for other job interviews. It's a bit hit and miss because you can spend. There's no time limit on it. So if you're like a bit stressed or perfectionist, you can spend hours on it, and ultimately for nothing potentially. But with the RESTAR technical test, it was mostly a Word document with some questions and some little like coding challenges, but nothing too bad. And then after that, luckily I passed, and I was interviewed by the developer. Part of the development team, 3 people, I think, 2 or 3 people, where they grilled me a bit on my tests. And then after that, there was the culture fit round, which was just talking with some sales employees and maybe HR.
What do you think you did well?
My favorite part is the culture fit. For me, it's very relaxing. Some engineers hate it because you have to be talking, maybe small talk even, or you're answering like very vague businessy questions, but I don't mind those. Or like, what's your career plan? Where do you see yourself in 8 years? Or like, how do you solve problems or communication? Like, I don't mind those. Also because I've only been a developer for 5 years, but before that I did like a variety of jobs in like social media and translation. And I used to work in like operations teams as well. So I haven't always been a developer, so I think of myself as a more social engineer than a lot of a profession maybe.
Are you telling me that some engineers are shy?
Yeah. Yeah, obviously it's like, I think it comes with the job a bit, but yeah.
Why do you think the researchers chose you? As in, how did you shine in the interview? Like, what do you think you did well during the interview? Like,
okay, so funnily enough, actually, I applied at RESTAR 2.5 years ago for the first time. So it was 2021, August, because I wanted to work with the Elixir language, and I was looking for a new small company to work for. But I was in August 2020 actually. Sorry, my bad. Yeah. So in the middle of the pandemic, And actually, they almost made me an offer, but I declined because my wife was out of a job at the time, and there was a lot of uncertainty with the pandemic, and I was working for a fairly big company, it's fairly stable. So that was more of a safe choice. But I applied again 2 months ago, and I was here. So I think that chose me because I'm fairly easy to work with. I never get into arguments or anything. I'm happy to discuss. I never get angry at anyone.
Yeah.
I think that's always a bit like in software development. There's always occasionally problems with egos, and I've encountered this actually for the first time last year. Someone with another developer with a very big ego who was an absolute nightmare to work with, and I don't have any of that. So that's usually what people who hire developers want to see as well. It's like, apart from the technical skills, can we work with this guy? And I think that's actually for me again, that's the easiest part of the interviews. It's that.
Is there a specific way you get to show this ability? Let's say you're a people person and you're good at teamwork. How did you get that across during the interview?
I think I don't remember, but some of the questions were about that. Imagine there's a crisis, some emergency in the company, and you have to deal with it. How do you gather information from the different parties? How do you, you're having a problem with working with someone, how do you deal with this? I don't remember what I said, but it must have been
have been impressive.
It's
Yeah. So I think you've been at RESTAR for about 2.5 weeks now.
Yeah.
Can you speak a little bit about the culture here, or your first impressions of the culture here? What is it like to work here?
I think the skill level in the engineering department is quite high, actually, thanks to senior developers and just the will to make a good product and write quality code and quality features. That's a step up for me. That's why I also joined RESTAR. I knew from the friend who referred me that the level was quite high, and I feel like at my previous job I was plateauing a bit. I had reached a bit of a ceiling. But in this case, I'm already challenged, and it's much harder in a way. Also, the domain we call that of a business is completely new to me. I don't know anything about real estate, so that was also an interesting part for me. Just learning about that.
Yeah.
And working in Japanese, because the last years I've mostly worked in English all the time, and because of the pandemic, I was feeling my Japanese fading away as well.
Have you found it difficult to work in Japanese? I don't know what your Japanese level is, though.
So technically I passed N2.
Okay, that's pretty good.
But I mean, maybe 5 years ago.
Okay.
And I would say I'm a very academic speaker. In a way, I can read well, but I'm not very good at speaking. And my wife is not Japanese; she's American, so I don't get as much practice as I would get.
I see.
Usually. And I was working in English all the time in my previous companies, so it was hard to. And I have to push myself a lot. I'm a perfectionist. When I speak Japanese, I want to try to speak perfect Japanese, which is a huge blocker for me. So I want to get a bit out of my comfort zone at RESTAR as well. Use more Japanese, especially in development, because I didn't know any vocabulary, but now I do. I know some more. Yeah.
Can I talk a little bit to you about before the RESTAR, before joining RESTAR, and even before coming to Japan? What were you doing before coming to Japan?
So I'm French, and I grew up in France, but I've actually lived in a few countries, the UK, Germany, Ireland, the US a tiny bit as well. And I was, I've been doing, I did some different jobs, again, social media in the video games industry, translation or project management in the translation company. That was in Japan. But before coming to Japan, I was just enjoying life, I suppose. And I wanted to come to Japan for the language, the culture, and see if I would like to live here. That was 9 years ago, so I think that's a yes.
Had you been to Japan before?
Once.
You just
Yeah, I did in Europe it's easy to take time off, so I did a 3-week trip to Japan a year or two before coming, and just to get a sense of the country. Like I had this image of, Japan sounds very nice, but first I wanted to just confirm what it would be like to be there. Yeah, and I did the whole tourist experience.
Yeah, and so you went to Japan once for I think 3 weeks, you said, and then after going back home, you decided to come to Japan. You've been in Japan for 9 years now?
Yes.
Wow. Do you remember what exactly was the initial draw about Japan for you?
It's very mainstream, or like anime, manga, even just Japanese language. I started studying before coming to Japan. I had the N4 before coming, actually. So yeah, it was the whole thing. Now it has changed. I barely watch any anime. I don't read any manga. That has kind of faded, and it's just more of I live here. This is my my life, and my Japanese is more about day-to-day things, restaurant, hotels.
How would you describe like living in Tokyo and living back home? Like, what is the difference?
So home for me is interesting. It's been almost I think it's 18 years since I left France. So home, I guess I can compare with Europe. There is one thing that I miss is just the parks here or nature is missing in Tokyo.
The nature?
Yeah.
Yes.
I lived in Berlin for 3 years, and every street was lined with trees, big trees, and there's none of that in Tokyo, or it's very uncommon. I do miss that. The commuting, my previous jobs, the commuting was an interesting experience as well. Squeezed on the train is what I'm saying. In Berlin or in UK, I used to bike to work. I tried that here, but biking is pretty dangerous. You're sharing the road with cars very often, and so I gave up on that too. So but on the other hand, Tokyo, Japan is always just safe and clean. Everything is on time. It's very comfortable. If I were to go back to Europe or go to the US, I would lose a lot of that comfort. It's a different kind. It's not unsafe per se, but you have to be. In Paris, you can't just have your wallet or your phone in your pocket outside your coat. You can't. It's going to get stolen within a couple of hours. Whereas in Japan, everyone's everyone has their handbag open. It's all their belongings. I've left things on the train many times, and I've always gotten them back. My wallet, So it's just nice, and you don't have to worry about that, which I find really nice, especially with a kid as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
When you first came to Japan to find, I think, or after you lived in Japan for a couple of years, I think you somehow transitioned from translating and I think the game industry to software engineering. Can you tell me how you did that?
So I actually have a bachelor in computer science, but I didn't get to use it much over my career. Or I was the guy writing macros in Excel, but that's terrible code. Eventually I transitioned to writing Python scripts. It was awful, but it was helping the team. And then after that, I got really interested in SQL and just querying data in my first job in Japan. And then eventually the engineering team took notice of that because I started helping them with debugging issues or pointing out problems with data. And I was lucky enough that the engineering team took me, there was an opening, and they took me as a junior engineer and trained me there. It was rough because it was an old platform with a lot of different technologies. There's a lot to understand for me. Yeah, and I was, my knowledge of computer science was like 10 years old already by the time. But I survived, and then it was also a conscious move for me because not being fluent in Japanese or like fluent enough in Japanese closes a lot of doors in Japan when it comes to jobs, and I didn't have like solid skills. I want to say like I was doing project management, but not in development. It was project management in translation projects, which is very narrow, and I don't speak Japanese, so translation project manager in Japan without speaking Japanese well enough is career-wise it was not the best move. So that's why I decided as well to embrace the development life.
I guess at first you said your knowledge was on technology that was pretty old. Now, how did you, I guess, update your knowledge, and like how did you get good?
Crying? No, not crying. Well, luckily, to me, it was all thanks to some mentors in the company, and just hanging on as long as you can until you're like basically drowning in information, and you don't think you can, go back to the surface or like stay afloat. But if you hang on and you put in the effort and you ask questions, asking questions and being in an environment where it's safe to ask questions or, comfortable asking questions is like key, I think. And people helping you, answering your questions. But I think not being scared of asking questions is like a huge skill to have as an engineer. Like, doesn't matter if you make a fool of yourself, right? Like, I've made a fool of myself many times, and you learn, and that's just how it is. And eventually reading books, technical books, and reading a lot of articles, that helped a lot.
Yeah. Were you always comfortable asking questions?
I think so, because I do not judge people for asking questions myself. Like, sometimes you don't know. It's better to ask the questions than stay silent and not, maybe be stuck for weeks. Yeah.
I mean, have you found that there are some teams that are, I think, conducive or create an environment where that is the case, where I think it's welcomed to ask questions and get not be stuck for too long? Have you seen the opposite as well?
Luckily, not too much. So far, no. No. I think I was lucky to be part of good engineering teams with a good culture as well. I haven't experienced the toxic ones that I've heard about from colleagues.
Like, for you personally, like, what makes a good engineering culture? You said you've been a part of good engineering cultures up until now. Trying not to, don't judge people. In general, I think everyone's trying to do their best, unless they're not, but you can probably see that or guess that. Strive to improve things over time. Always be teaching others as well, if you can. Someone doesn't understand something, it's nice to either sit down with them and explain what's going on, or share information, like where can they read more about this. Or even just working with someone, coding at the same time on the same problem. That one is critical. And I think in general, as a developer, it's very important to understand the business itself, not just like code features, like fix bugs, but also understand what the domain is about, like what is the company about, what are we trying to do. This helps you become a better engineer by yourself coming up with suggestions, maybe, or like, oh, we could do this better, or what if we did this would only take a couple of days, but it achieves 90% of what you want. This kind of stuff, you can achieve that by understanding what is going on in general, not just coding. I think there may be some teams that I think emphasize having the domain knowledge, like you said, and some teams that don't really emphasize this. Like, how do you gain this business domain knowledge? Like when you join a new company, like do you have some stuff that you like to do when you join?
I mean, I'm going to go back to don't be afraid to ask questions.
Okay.
Yeah. And especially getting, if you can get sessions with people who understand, know the product or like know what we're doing, if you can get time with them and ask them any questions, doesn't matter if it's like maybe a stupid question or like very basic question, it doesn't matter. Even just getting a tiny bit of information will help you in the grand scheme of things understand more about the product. So, and once you've reached a certain level of understanding, I think, or like once you understand the platform a bit more, maybe do some research yourself, like start reading by yourself, so that you can maybe eventually contribute to like discussions, also maybe gain information that people don't have. But I think at first, just ask questions.
And I think earlier in your answer, you said like if you're able to get the time with the people that have the domain knowledge, at RESTAR, has it been easy or hard, or have you faced any problems with being able to get the time with people?
I think it's more than everyone's really busy and we're hiring a lot. So I've had some time, especially with our CEO, where he dedicated an hour to me and another employee, where I was like free to ask any questions about the product, like understand who the users are, why we have those features, who needs those features. That was very key. And that was just an hour with him. But then the other engineers now, especially when we are working in the same place, like in the co-working space, especially, just asking like, what is this feature? What does it do? Why do we have this? Even those basic questions like help you a lot, especially because the product here is very, very advanced. Like, it has so many more features than I thought it had. And I'm finding out new ones every day, and it's only been 3 weeks. But yeah, a lot of data. It's a lot to understand, but it's also very, very interesting.
I totally agree with everything that you said. I kind of want to ask you a little bit about Elixir. So you said that like you have been interested in Elixir for quite a long time. Do you remember what made you first get into Elixir?
Yeah, so it's actually the friend who referred me. We were working in the same company 3 years ago, and he wanted to learn a new language. And he loves programming. Like he programs on the weekend. I used to a bit just for studying. I don't so much anymore. And he just wanted to learn a new language, something different and maybe a bit fun. And then he started that. I didn't have that much experience. I had like 2 years of experience at the time. I was like, okay, I mean, that sounds interesting. I want to learn too. So, we bought 1 or 2 books about the language, and he was really excited about it. And I think that made me more curious about the language. And and I learned a lot of new concepts, but I didn't know up until then. And that's how that was my gateway into the world of Elixir. And it's been, almost 3 years now. And I'm still like very, very much willing to work with it. And that's why I joined RESTAR as well. I want to work in Elixir because it's been weirdly a joy to work with. And I'm not even the hardcore developer kind of guy, but it's like, I would recommend it.
What were you working with before Elixir?
Oh yeah, so my first job at the time was there were a lot of different technologies, but we had the Python, Go, and there was PHP, some old version of PHP. All was free. Plus, architecture-wise, it was had evolved into something very, very hard to understand and maintain. So I had like 3 kind of classic languages. Python being my favorite at the time, and in the front end, various things as well. I'm not sure. I was mostly in the back end, but various technologies as well.
I see. And how did you get good at Elixir?
This feels like a Dark Souls question. Get good. A lot of studying, reading. There are not that many books about it, but the ones that are out there are very, very good. Just programming by myself. Instead of doing things in Python, just start doing them in Elixir. Even things that didn't feel natural at all. Just like challenging myself and doing things in Elixir, that helped a lot. And then starting following like people on Twitter, or being more active on Reddit. For example, there's a tiny subreddit that is almost, kind kind of active, but not so much. But just like being more connected, plugged into the Elixir community, that helped a lot. Just like reading about subscribing to newsletters, various tips and tricks in your inbox every week. Just like, surround yourself with Elixir knowledge.
And lastly, before we go, can you tell me about the most important piece of career advice you've experienced or received?
I think it was from one of the senior developers at my first job, is that just starting to, instead of getting knowledge from work and people around me, just actively look for knowledge, books, articles, following people on Twitter, other developers, better developers, watch videos like from conferences, like all that is a habit that I did not have. And as soon as I started doing it, it was very hard at first. Just convincing myself to study, basically, go back to school. As soon as I started spending time doing this, I became a better developer, I think. So just basically learning to study again was the biggest advice. And try to stay on top of development technologies, because it tends to change fairly quickly. In the Elixir world, not so much, and that's a blessing. Just staying on top of things. Never rest too much if you can.
Thank you, Julien. This was Julien Crevits, and he's a software engineer at RESTAR. Thank you for joining this interview.
Thank
and
you for your time.
Congratulations on the baby.
Thank you.